In my ongoing fascination with propagandistic language, I give you the website Politico, which today is reporting on the migrant caravan, which is a pseudonym and part of propaganda already. And they're talking about, the title is Trump Threatens Border Shutdown if Mexico Doesn't Remove Migrants. So just so you understand how this language works, what you want to do is you want to get the person's name together with a negative word as quickly as humanly possible. So here we have the juicy propaganda sandwich called Trump Threatens. Trump threatens. So Trump is threatening. It's not that he's attempting to enforce the law. It's not that he's attempting to protect America from a kind of invasion. Trump is threatening. And then it's border shutdown. A shutdown, like government shutdown and so on. A shutdown is a negative word if Mexico doesn't remove migrants. Now, remove is a very interesting word here because they're not saying deport or repatriate or anything like that. Remove migrants. Now, remove has a sinister sound to it. They're being removed. What does that even mean? And it doesn't remove to where, for what cause, and so on. So this is beautifully done as far as propaganda goes. Now here, and this is one of the many pictures that is being used, well, not very many, but pictures of women and children, right? So you want to show women and children. This is well known when it comes to propaganda because of the general white knighting that is kind of being bled dry over time these days. But here you say a Honduran woman rests with her granddaughter. Right? Rests with her granddaughter. So that is designed, of course, to make the what are called the migrants, illegal aliens, the invaders. It's designed to make them as harmless as humanly possible, as in, well, who could object to these people who are fleeing, and right? So you don't see the overwhelming majority of young men. Of course, you don't see them throwing rocks at border guards and so on. You just want to always show as least as threatening as possible so that any reaction looks like an overreaction. So President Donald Trump on Monday demanded, it's a demand, it's not an enforcement of the law. Now I want you to sort of understand how this would be portrayed if, say, it was a bank and people were trying to break into a bank, right? They were entering the bank without permission, against the law, right? So it's a bank robbery, basically, someone drilling up Ocean's 11 style in some sort of infiltration of the bank security system, bypassing of the bank security system. So the bank president threatens to close the bank if the bank robbers don't stop trying to get in, right? That would be an odd way, right? So President Donald Trump on Monday demanded that Mexico deport the caravans of asylum-seeking migrants pressing up against the U.S. border. Any way you want, threatening to close off the U.S. border permanently if need be, right? So, first of all, caravan. It's not a caravan. I remember when caravans were fun, and this is not a caravan. But it's called a caravan because that sounds like a fun word. It's a party. It's a gaggle. It's a gathering. Asylum-seeking migrants. No, they're not asylum-seeking migrants because Honduras is not attacking them on the basis of their religion or their sex or their political affiliations and so on. No, they're people who just want to get into America for free stuff from the welfare state. So in this picture, the more sentimental among us, let's say maybe slightly more women than men, will look at this and say, oh, it's a harmless baby and a grandmother and so on, right? So, well, they're not really any threat. Whereas, of course, taxpayers, maybe slightly more men than women, look at this and say, oh, well, there's a woman who's going to need a lot of health care, and she's going to need a lot of social support, which is going to be paid for by my tax dollars. And here's a little kid who probably doesn't speak English, who's going to need a lot of services in Spanish, and is going to need a lot of health care, and is going to need to be educated, and so on. And so it's just two different ways of looking at it. Now, asylum-seeking migrants, if you are seeking asylum, you're supposed to stay in the first safe country that you can get to, which is not America. So they're not asylum-seeking migrants. Now, Trump tweeted, and they quote, Mexico should move the flag-waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their countries. Do it by plane, do it by bus, do it any way you want, but they are not coming into the U.S.A. Trump tweeted, this is brilliant, offering no evidence to support his claim that the migrants are criminals. No evidence to support his claim that the migrants are criminals. Because you see, after, what is it now, more than a year and a half of Mueller's Russia collusion investigation, where there's no proof of Russia collusion and so on, now you see it's really, really important that people provide evidence for their claims. It wasn't important during the entire Mueller investigation. No need to support evidence. When Comey let Hillary Clinton off the hook for her mishandling of classified information, creating this magical standard of intent which doesn't exist in the law for the crime, nobody said, well, where's your support? Where's your evidence for all of this? Now, offering no evidence. Now, how on earth is he supposed to show evidence in a tweet, right? So, of course, if you feel or believe that somebody is not giving you the evidence that they should, then what you should do, of course, is look up the evidence. And it's not that hard to find that there are about 270 confirmed criminals in the, quote, caravan. And, say, oh, well, they say, well, where's the evidence or proof for that? And it's like, well, that's kind of law enforcement stuff. It's kind of private and so on. But anyway, offering no evidence. Now, of course, you could go look up the evidence, but that's not the point because the point is propaganda. Now, along with the sort of now classic meme, Republicans pounce or Republicans seize upon, right, and make it look reactive and emotional. What happens is, if, let's say, somebody wants to get into your house, right, like a home invader wants to get into your house, and you push them out and you try and remove them or threaten them to stay out of your house, then the equivalent here would be chaos broke out on your doorstep, right? Just chaos. You weren't repelling somebody who's trying to get into your house illegally. You weren't protecting your property and your family and your possessions and so on. It would just be this mysterious chaos broke out, just, chaos. And what that means, of course, is that those who are defending the law and those who are breaking the law are considered to be equivalent, and there's just, who can tell? Who can tell who is to blame when a bank manager is attempting to protect his safe and somebody's trying to get into it? Who can tell? It's just chaos. It's just chaos. The clash, right? It's just a clash. It's just some mysterious clash. The clash prompted Mexico's Interior Ministry to vow that it would increase the security at the border. The ministry said it had arrested more than 36 migrants who, quote, violently attempted to breach the border, according to the Associated Press. Isn't that interesting? So you've got to dig down a little bit here. Right, so Trump says the migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, there's no evidence to support the claim that migrants are criminals. Well, one piece of evidence would be that they're attempting to enter the U.S. illegally. That would be, like, if you believe that you are a valid asylum seeker, then of course you should present yourself and you should go through the paperwork and you should, as happens in Europe, of course, fake all of your documentation with the help of an NGO and pretend to be a Christian and so on. But that's right. So when he's saying there's no evidence that the migrants are criminals, well, the fact that they're attempting to cross the border without presenting themselves for vetting and paperwork is a criminal activity in and of itself. No evidence. There's no evidence that the people who broke into your home illegally are criminals. No evidence whatsoever. Maybe they thought it was an Airbnb. I don't know. Right? So here they say there's no evidence that any of the migrants are criminals, and then here they say 36 migrants attempted to violently breach the border. And again, it takes a special kind of newspeak brain to not notice these mad and rampant contradictions. It's really quite remarkable. So it says the Trump administration reached a tentative deal over the weekend with the administration of incoming Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador that would keep the migrants in Mexico while their U.S. asylum claims are processed, rather than allowing them to remain in the U.S. during that time. Trump has repeatedly referred to the migrants as criminals en masse, despite there being no evidence to support his claims. Again, first of all, there are hundreds of criminals, according to law enforcement. There are 36 more who've attempted to, more than 36, violently attempted to breach the border. And the fact that they want to come across into America without going through due process. I mean, can you imagine? Just you want to get on a plane and you just walk your way through the customs? I mean, what would happen? Well, chaos would erupt, I'm sure, according to these guys, right? So, yeah, anyway, there's money for the wall and so on. But yeah, it is really quite remarkable just how well all of this stuff is put together in an attempt to appeal to sentimental people who are like, oh, the poor people and so on. I'm so cynical at this point regarding all of this migrant stuff that part of me just says, okay, well, these people are kind of dragged along against their will as props for the photographers. And, anyone who takes a baby through Mexico on this crazy migrant path, which has now been severely accelerated by the access to buses and flatbed trucks and so on. They're saying, oh, it's so terrible that these children are at the border. It's like, yeah, it kind of is terrible that these children are at the border. And they should not have been brought to the border. It's absolutely wrong that they were brought to the border, but that's the way they are playing it. And, of course, this is thin edge of the wedge, tip of the spear. If there are people who get in, then it'll just go further. So, yeah, it's just wild. It's just wild. And you can see the leftist propaganda here, because if this was a tax revolt, well, it would be absolutely unacceptable. And, the government would move in and seize assets, and everyone would be like, well, they're not paying their fair share, and that's what happens. So, yeah, this is just the attempt to say, oh, these poor people, they're just asylum seekers, and Trump is just threatening them for no reason. It is just amazing to see, but that's the mad language of propaganda we currently live in.